Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Data Chat Live. This is Cameron Cowan, your host. I am coming to you live from the foothills of the Wasatch Mountains here in Pleasant Grove, Utah. Along for the ride, as is our usual arrangement, is Mike Fong. Say hello to everybody, Mike.
Hi, Cameron. Hello again. It's great to be a Robin to your Batman once more, and coming to you from north of London, Watford, UK.
Awesome. Love to always have Mike over and have his perspective on things that are beyond the borders of us here in North America. But for an even different perspective, we are excited to announce our guest for today's episode, and that is Jen Coons. Jen, say hello to everybody.
Hello, everyone. I guess
Now,
I'm
Jen,
calling in from Atlanta if we're saying
from
location.
Atlanta, and are things kind of scorching down there? I know I've been to Atlanta once in the summertime and didn't really enjoy it. What's it like right now?
Yeah, it is hot. Um, I would say they call it nobody actually calls it Hotlanta, but yes, it is hot right now. It's hot and muggy, but hasn't been that bad of a summer.
Good. And Jen and I actually go way back. I was
Yeah.
looking at our LinkedIn profiles and comparing notes. I remember working with Jen back in the Omniture days, shortly after I started there. Jen, I think you started in Omniture, what, about 2006 or so?
Yep.
Okay. And have definitely been in the digital marketing and digital analytics ecosystem for quite a while. Why don't you just give a quick introduction and tell our audience a little bit about how you got to where you're at now?
Sure. So I was a web developer and in the Utah Valley. And like you said, started at Omniture in 2006. And really, I've been consulting pretty much the same role, implementation consulting, ever since. Took a couple years off to have kids. And to be honest, thinking I was leaving the industry permanently and never coming back. And then 2 years later, decided to come back and um, been at different agencies. I did return to Adobe for a while. I was there for 4 or 5 years. And then for the last 4 years, I had 33 Sticks, which is a boutique analytics agency focusing on analytics and optimization.
Okay. And I see in your title, principal architect or principal analytics architect. Tell us a little bit about what does that mean for you day to day? What kind of things are you working on, and how are you helping the clients you work with?
So my main job is helping my clients get the right data into their first-party analytics tool, Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics, which means I spend a lot of time in data layers and technical specs and tag management systems. So in addition to analytics, a lot of my job has become about third-party marketing tags and deploying those and all of the different ways of uh, deploying and cookies. So server side and all of that stuff has all come up more recently.
Fantastic. So you got a perspective on a number of topics we were hoping to hit on today. I think I'm going to dive over and just give a quick overview about some of the things that we do want to hit on. As we look at what was sent out in some of the marketing announcements, whole bullet point list. I don't think we're going to have time to even hit on all of these over the next 25 minutes or so. But there's a couple of key news-worthy things that are happening in our industry that we want to make sure we cover off and get your perspective on, Jen. And also just understand more broadly some of the principles that you have been working on and some of the information you pass along to the clients that you engage with. From that perspective, the one I want to hit on first is Google Analytics 4. We all, hopefully, I don't know if it's hopefully, we all are tending to see this banner show up anytime we log into a Google Analytics property that's not yet updated, telling us, hey, the clock has started. We are now, since our last episode, now within that 1 year mark. And I'm also going to call out Jason Thompson. So somebody you work with quite a bit over there at 33 Sticks, Jen.
Yeah.
And Jason had some pretty strong words for our audience back when we had him on the show. I think it was October of last year. To the point where I pulled a couple of the clips and he said, GA4 is still beta. It's not ready for prime time. Start to use it, but at best parallel path it and do not make it your primary source of truth. We're now about 3/4 past that. Jen, love to get your perspective on where you think things are at with GA4. Are you encouraging your customers to wrap their arms all the way around it? Are there reasons to still be a little hesitant and push off even though that date is starting to creep on us?
Yeah, I have opinions on GA4 as well.
That's why you're here. The
Um,
opinions are what we want to hear.
yeah, I don't know if it's fair to still say beta, but it almost feels like it is because they are releasing a lot of updates and making changes. Like they just re-released bounce rate after saying it was gone last week. So it is definitely a work in progress, I suppose, is the way to put it. But since they're kind of forcing everyone's hand to move to it, kind of you either have to embrace it or you have to start thinking about other tools. So I have a client that a few weeks before they announced that Universal Analytics was dying, had chosen to go from Adobe Analytics to Google. So just after making that decision, we found out, oh, we're not moving to Universal Analytics at all. It's not even worth it probably to dual implement, and let's just dive fully into GA4. So we're currently in that process and seeing some of the things that will work better. You know, for instance, if you have a data science team and you're working a lot in BigQuery and things like that, then GA4 is really good for that. If you are perhaps a little newer or you're a friendly reporting interface and more Google Analytics used to be a wonderful entry level tool. Like you didn't have to have a bunch of resources dedicated to analytics to get value out of it. I think with GA4 and even on the Adobe side, move to the Web SDK and Customer Journey Analytics, which I know we'll talk about in a little bit. We're moving more and more away from that. Anyone can dive in and start doing it, and more into the potentially a lot more value in the data science and the deep dive stuff, but it is definitely a higher learning curve.
It almost seems easier to go from Adobe to GA4 now rather than from GA 360 or GA Universal, whatever you choose to call it, to GA4, just because there is that kind of, it's almost, as you mentioned, a different target audience for these two tools. It's been a long time since I did my GAIQ many years ago anyway.
Yeah.
Is there any equivalent training or qualification certification for GA4?
Yeah, I think that it is still around GAIQ, and if they don't currently have GA4 like certifications, then they've got to be coming out very soon. But I know that Chris Decidin has some really good GA4 training courses. More and more documentation and training is popping up, but it's also hard to have good training and documentation when the tool is changing constantly.
We changed our mind about bounce rate. Here it is. There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's wait till some of that dust settles before we formalize the certification.
Well, and I remember like back in 2013, I had a client that was on GA, was comparing GA and Adobe as an option and having them both run. And then Google kind of redefined session visits without a whole lot of warning. And for a small company, that may not be as big a thing, but this was a massive conglomerate of many, many different brands, and they had to retrain like 400 people. So innovation's good. Google's always been able to move more quickly because it doesn't care as much about hurting people's feelings with older technology, where Adobe, everything I learned in 2006, a lot of that is still applicable. But even that's not true. As of the last few years with the Web SDK, I suddenly am a rookie again. So,
yeah, I think we all are feeling that change hitting the ecosystem quite a bit. So let's actually shift off of the Google discussion and talk a little bit about where I think, Jen, you're a little bit more specialized on, and that's Adobe. And specifically, I want to talk about customer journey analytics. I know that this has come up in a number of customer discussions I've had just recently. Adobe's very excited about customer journey analytics. It looks like it solves some really unique use cases and problems. Tell us a little bit about, just level set for the whole audience, Adobe Analytics versus customer journey analytics. How are they comparable? How are they different? When should you think about moving to one from the other?
So customer journey analytics, first, I am not an Adobe evangelist. Like Eric Matisoff's going to hear this and be like, hoping I get this all right. And I don't have any clients currently on it, but I've been involved in a fair amount of training and betas and playing around with it and just kind of the ideas behind it. So CJA, Customer Journey Analytics, is basically it's Analysis Workspace, which is I think a wonderful reporting interface, but maybe that's just I've been in it and using it for a long time, and it's constantly improving and everything. It's basically Analysis Workspace, but for any data set that you want. So it allows you to pull in, if you want, it can be a data set that has absolutely nothing to do with analytics. Or it can be a data set like a call center where you now want to merge that identity of, that your online user, Jane Doe 123, called into the call center. Now let's have one interface where you can see all of that data together.
And they're able to do that because CJA sits on the Experience platform, not just in an individual product like Adobe Analytics. Is that right?
Yeah. So CJA you can get as an add-on to Adobe Analytics, and you can certainly view your Adobe Analytics data in it and send your data along, whether you have an old free web SDK, so app measurement implementation, or you're moving to the web SDK. I will admit, it all definitely was designed more, it feels like, with web SDK in mind. But it is all built on the Experience platform. And I'll be honest, that's another thing I have strong opinions on, is the branding that Adobe has gone with platform, that everything is named platform now. And there's platform, the CDP, like the actual paid tool that it is kind of what Experience platform used to be. And now there is kind of platform, the technology, the stuff behind the web SDK and CJA. And then there's platform, the brand, like they're calling client-side Adobe Launch now, that really doesn't have a ton to do with platform, but it's all platform now.
Yeah, well, if there's one thing we know from having worked at Omniture and Adobe is that wait a couple quarters and the branding will probably change.
Yep, exactly.
One of the things I do appreciate
I'm going to keep calling it Launch, even though it's data collection tags now.
Tags, yeah, Launch.
Is it tags now, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I do appreciate is I remember back in like 2005, 2006, we used to talk to people about Site Catalyst being able to ingest data from all these external places and using uploads and data sources to get more data in that didn't naturally get collected by a web analytics tag. So at least with CJ and what I've seen initially, that vision, which is now a decade and a half old, is really starting to bear fruit. People are indeed able to merge together all kinds of data and still use, like you said, that awesome reporting interface that is Analysis Workspace, but not use it strictly for web analytics only data.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
All right. Go ahead.
I was just it's an interesting proposition, though, because I think the folks that are familiar with Analysis Workspace are not the data science team and the people that are currently doing all of the deep querying of data. And I think Adobe has a tough job ahead of them of trying to edge more into that space and find the audience for folks who love Adobe products and understand what Adobe's getting at, but also understand, data schemas and querying and all of the background stuff that makes CJA work. So kind of curious how that takes off.
And then you're now directly competing with some of the biggest business intelligence and data visualization platforms like Tableau and Microsoft's tool.
Although Adobe would tell you that it's not it's an supplemental tool. Like it plays well with those other tools. But
indeed,
yeah, like I said, they have a hard sell, I think, on some of that. So.
Yeah. Now, one of the ways in which we actually got connected, so like I said, we've known each other back since 2006, was...
You were my Search Center buddy.
Search Center, if anybody knows
you answered all my Search Center questions back in the day.
That is right. And we've gone back and forth. Like you said, you bounced in and out of Omniture and then back to Adobe for a few years. But I just ran into you at the Marketing Analytics Summit in Las Vegas last month. And you gave what I thought was really one of the best talks at that entire show. It was great because I was presenting the next day. And you essentially primed the entire audience on the topic I wanted to talk about. You gave all the principles, and then I actually went in and did some of the practical application the next day. To the point where I was checking out their listing, and it listed your title as Principal Architect. And if you notice the spelling on that, I assume really good principles, and you set up frameworks.
Well, and it's funny because I'm known for like catching typos and driving me crazy, and I actually didn't see that one until way too late in the game. Somebody else pointed it out, and like, how did I not notice? But yeah.
Well, but I think one of the reasons I called that out is because you really did lay out a bunch of really good principles as they relate to data governance and how
tying it together.
Should be thinking about not what was the title? Not letting your tags overwhelm you,
Mhm.
something to that effect.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to not recast that whole presentation here to our audience, but maybe pull out one or two of the most important nuggets for you. When people are thinking about digital governance and how they should manage not just analytics, but all of the tags and data that's being collected on their website, what are the things that you're guiding your clients to think about most importantly?
A lot of it is really just knowing what you have out there. That alone is a big thing for some companies. I a lot of companies when I've started working with them have hundreds of tags that have been around since who knows how long, and everyone's afraid to delete them because if you don't know who owns it, you don't know who to ask to delete it. Um,
I had an acquaintance who, if he's listening, he'll be happy I mentioned him. He's a scorched earth way of doing this. You basically
yep,
turn off everything and then figure out
yep.
who squeals, basically.
I actually had a slide in my presentation about how the nuclear option is my preferred way, but it's kind of a hard sell sometimes. Um, So a lot of what I did in preparation for it was figuring out how to actually quantify the impact of maybe having a messy MarTech implementation. Um,
Mhm.
as we all know that it's bad, but we don't necessarily know how bad, or we just kind of accept that it's a given. Like, yeah, well, we have to have tracking. So if it's weighing down the side at all or anything, well, you just have to find the balance and prioritize it. But I think a lot of folks would be surprised by just how much of an impact it does have. So by the way, pretty much everything I had on my talk is up on my blog at digitaldata.tactics.com. I spent a ridiculous amount of, it ended up being 11 blog posts, I think,
Oh, wow.
because there's just a lot of detail I wanted to go into. But ways that you can see how your site behaves with your TMS, without your TMS. And in some cases, we saw, the tag management system was 15% of the site's overall weight. Um,
Jeez.
in
Wow.
in one case, we saw where if you look at all the different MarTech technology, including analytics and optimization and things that aren't just retargeting pixels, um, it was half of the site's weight for one of the media companies I looked at.
Right.
Now there are ways that you can mitigate that, but even if you have it all asynchronous and all like best practices, that's still just a lot. And aside from the site speed impact, there's just the difficulty of maintaining it. Both for whatever poor soul is in the tag management system, trying to keep the ship afloat with 180 different tags in different places, or with privacy and all of the changes happening with browser policies and things like that, trying to keep them updated and compliant becomes harder and harder if you don't have a good control over what's on your site.
Jen,
Yeah.
you're just mirroring everything we tell our customers and prospective customers about, what are the benefits to minimizing tags? We always say it can make your page load faster. It definitely isn't going to go slower. It can reduce the burden and the overhead maintenance. It can definitely improve your data quality. And also, it can definitely reduce your risk of just from a data privacy, right? If you have fewer third-party packages, then basically you have less to worry about. There's another reason I interrupted you is that we have a conversation in our audience. So Tony Dietmer, I hope I'm saying that right. Tony asks, are there any third-party tags to watch out for that specifically that can weigh down the site
Oh.
more than others? Have you seen in your experience any specific tags that will just slow things down?
They're going to make some vendors out there angry. To be honest, a lot of it has more to do with how things are implemented, I think. For instance, GTAG, in theory, should be fairly light. But a lot of folks, they copy and paste the GTAG snippet in over and over and over, and without realizing that they are pasting that library over and over and over. So you might be loading the same file 6 times, and it's not that light of a file. But even like a tag management system itself, Google Tag Manager with 0 in it is like 30 kilobytes or something like that. And easily that can build and build and build. So some of it is just the sheer volume and how you are deploying it and how careful you are about deduplicating anything that can be deduplicated. Um, and yes, somebody had asked here, what is weight? And yes, I'm talking, when I say something's heavy, I am talking about load time and page size. And even that's really hard to talk about because when we talk about site speed, are we talking about overall weight, which may or may not be that relevant because things load after the user can already interact with the interface. And if it's loading without them knowing it, is it really that big of a problem? Are we talking about time to interaction or first content paint? Like all of these different terms, everybody has a different definition of what we should be measuring when we're looking at site speed. Um,
And
but
Jen, in your
yeah.
in your experience, working with clients and your personal experience, do you find that organizations are still, is there a target page weight or size or load time that they're targeting? And is it generally based on, say, a desktop full screen kind of device? Because you can have a page size which is absolutely adequate for, a full broadband connection. But if you've got 20, 30 or above percent of your customers accessing your page from a mobile device, are you
Right.
finding that organizations are behind on thinking about those mobile page weights?
I think they're trying more and more. I have certainly heard more conversations about mobile. But here's what usually happens. The tech team or the SEO team comes to the analytics team and says, Martech stuff is too heavy. It's slowing down the site. It's bringing our SEO score down. Fix it up, and maybe some of it might be fixed up and cleaned up. But in the end, there's usually a point where we're like, well, it's as good as we can get it, and it is what we have to have tracking. We are paying a lot of money for these tools and these marketing campaigns. So we're going to prioritize it, even though we know it's going to slow the site down some. So we do see that a lot. Sorry, to get back to Tony's question real quick, I will say you have to watch out for any tool where another party can add tags to your site. So like double click for publishers. Um, I'm trying to remember some of the other ones, but there are a lot where other tags can now piggyback on it, and that's where things get really slowed down. Is you deployed a single tag, but it actually added 9 different tags to your site.
Yeah, we've
So
definitely seen a number of instances. I mean, the one that sticks out to me is whenever you embed a YouTube video onto your website,
mhm.
unless you do it in a very specific way, it's always going to have Google ad remarketing coming along for the ride, whether you want it there or not. Similar, we saw when LinkedIn purchased, was it Drawbridge? Now that Drawbridge tag gets fired off because you have LinkedIn tags on your
Yep.
site, not because you implement it. So, yeah, we definitely see that piggybacking show up quite a bit. One of the things that I was wondering about, Jen, you talk about just overall performance and the impact of tags and weight on both the user experience as well as just how long the page takes to load behind the scene. There are those that believe server side may be this magic bullet to help solve all those ills. What's your quick perspective on server side and its ability to help, but also how you see it growing and being adopted in the market you're working with?
So server side is actually a really good solution for helping with site speed issues. That is the main thing that it is a great solution for. What it is not perhaps a great solution for that the industry gets really confused on is the cookie apocalypse or whatever we want to call it, moving to a cookieless future. Actually, I literally was just on Measure Slack talking about this with someone who was saying, like, okay, we're moving to server side. How do we do this cookieless thing? And well, the bad news is um, vendors still need a way to identify users as they go from page to page. So if you have the JavaScript side of your server side implementation, there's still going to be cookies. There's still going to be consent and things are maybe improving with the ability to maybe define your own user ID, but in that case, you better know that you can do it consistently. And it is still a mess. And to be honest, server side, it certainly doesn't hurt it, but in many cases, it doesn't help it either. So that's my big thing on server side is yes, site speed, it should help. Um, don't let it make you uh, don't get sloppy just because you can, though. I do think a lot of folks, oh, we're moving to server side, let's deploy all of the things. It's not going to hurt anyone. IT is not going to yell at us. SEO team is not going to yell at us anymore. It won't cause JavaScript errors. But compliance is definitely still a thing. And just because the user can't see that you are, they have a personal identifier that's reporting on their site activity, even if there is no personally identifiable information. GDPR and CCPA, they don't care whether it's personally identifiable information. It's just, is it personal information? So an anonymous ID like Google or Adobe uses still counts as my personal information because it's on my browser and it reports my history. So even if I'm on server side, that's still true. Even if I'm not using a single cookie, that's still true. It's what we are tracking that matters. And I think a lot of people get really confused and wrapped up in just the idea of client-side implementations that use cookies are bad and everything else is better. And it's not
Yeah,
necessarily true.
and I really appreciate that perspective, because so many people that are pushing the server-side discussion only talk about everything that's in the pros column, and they don't bring up, oh, there's reasons not to do it or challenges you're going to have to overcome if you do it.
That's my specialty. I'm really good at pointing at bursting people's bubbles.
Well,
I'm the well actually person.
as a very slight detour, but you brought up the cookie apocalypse, I think is the term you used. Just hot off the presses, something we saw come through just yesterday. It looks like Google is once again announcing another delay in when they think they're going to formally and fully be blocking third-party cookies. So we originally heard January of 2020 that it was going to be within 2 years, so the end of this current year we're in now. Then last year they bumped it to 2023, and it looks like as of yesterday they're kind of pushing that out further. Are we ever going to get there, Jen? How do you see this changing the landscape? Does this affect how you would advise your customers thinking about third-party tags and cookies?
So, are we ever going to get there is an interesting question, because yeah, Google has been redefining, and I don't think anyone is very shocked by the announcement, though it is certainly an important thing to be aware of. But we all have to remember that Safari is already out there, and it is already blocking third-party cookies and has been for a little while, and blocking a lot of first-party cookies depending on how you set it. Depending on your business model and your audience, I think in general, like half of the internet is on Safari because people are on their iPhones. So we focus a lot on Google, but really we should be playing to I don't want to say the lowest common denominator, but the most strict, I suppose, because that still has a really big impact. With Google, it's interesting, though, because so much of it hasn't been necessarily about getting rid of third-party cookies. It's what are we doing to replace it? When they announced that they were moving away from third-party cookies, initially it was FLoC, the Federated Learning of Cohorts. Yep. And now it's topics, and they keep kind of changing their approach. But really what they're trying to do is make it so you can still retarget even without a cookie, which brings me back to what I was just saying. A lot of compliance laws and a lot of what people get upset about doesn't care if it's a cookie or not. It's what you are doing with the data that matters. So Google has a really hard job ahead of them if they're going to try to make it so we can still do all of the retargeting and all of the stuff that knows about the user but doesn't know about them in a way that freaks people out, I guess. Yeah. But I also have strong opinions on whether or not people should be freaked out by retargeting, but that's probably another discussion as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a whole other half hour. Well, one more kind of newsworthy thing I wanted to quickly hit on before we run out of time today is the announcement that was made just a few weeks ago by Mozilla. And we talk about, let's go back one slide. We talk about privacy implications and what browsers are doing to kind of tighten that up. Firefox is now giving people the ability to strip URL parameters. So go in and actually say, you know what, when they hit my landing pages, there's no more CIDs, there's no more tokens for my email marketing.
Certain URL parameters.
Yes.
For now.
It's an option. It's an option that users can enable if they choose to. It's not something that happens by default. So it's very much, I think it'll have the same effect as a ad blocker, right? Customers who choose to will be able to block those, block that tracking, basically.
Yeah,
but from what I understand, though, like it's focusing on the known bad. Like everyone hates Facebook, so the FB CLID, that's the first prime target. But the good news is most of the folks on Adobe, at least, if you have a CID, if you have a CMP ID, a lot of that is safe for the time being.
I don't believe so. I actually ran a test, Jen. I actually ran a test. I updated to the latest version of Firefox. I turned on the setting and I made up my own query parameter, and it removed it straight away.
Oh, wow. So maybe at the most strict setting, it'll take everything off, but also have some others that are known. Yeah, I know that when I looked at the list, there's like half a dozen of them. I'm like, okay, Facebook, I get. Some of the others, they seemed a little obscure. Marketo's got a pretty big market share.
Yeah, right.
I hadn't even heard of them. They're like, yeah, we're going to strip them because we don't like them. I think for me, the bigger implication isn't that this is happening and it's happening on Firefox. I put in the stats there at the bottom. Firefox is depending on the data you look at, it's between 3 and 4% of market share. So that's not big. But what happens if all of a sudden tomorrow Apple says, you know what, in Safari, we're going to strip off anything that says UTM? And that's a massive disruption. So I think I'm more projecting out of
Yeah,
what
exactly. That's my thing too, is that this is the beginning. Um, and I'll be honest, I get really frustrated by it because what problem are we trying to solve? I think there's a lot of fear mongering about like we're protecting you from the big bad trackers, um, in the ways that are obvious and easy to do, like blocking third party trackers, without actually looking at how that improves the user's experience and prevents them from harm. Um, but like we said, that's probably a whole other discussion. Um,
I think we're
yeah,
entering a parameter battle phase of the browser wars, right?
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
new
It's
phase.
who can scare users the most into thinking
Yeah.
that they are protecting them the best.
Yeah, and
That's
it's a
right.
shame because lots of users don't realize that if that were to go mainstream and become the default behavior, you'd lose all those affiliate code discounts, like affiliate
Yep,
tracking, voucher codes. Those just suddenly collapse, and
exactly.
suddenly everyone's got to figure out a
Yeah.
new way to find their discounts. Or maybe organizations will just price their products in a more
Maybe,
reasonable
maybe.
way. Yeah.
So
We got a question from
Lorenzo,
Lorenzo. Oh, go on,
yeah,
go
I
for
was
it, Jen.
just gonna say, is saying, well, we could get around it by using header values, and that I call it whack-a-mole. What's going on, particularly with Apple, where they say no third-party cookie. Adobe says, okay, first-party cookies will use CNAMEs, and then Apple says, no CNAMEs either, and it's just we find a solution and it lasts a little while, and then Apple's usually the first one to swoop in and say, nope, you have to find a new workaround. Um,
The
yeah,
interesting thing for me there is that no matter what happens, it's like water. It's always finding a way out. And if you
Yeah.
close one, it's just going to find another pour to slide through.
yeah.
So
And
I feel,
advertising is too big and too powerful for it to just be shut down entirely. So there's always going to be a way.
I can
exactly
see
right.
a situation where I think it's the Competitions and Markets Authority will come along and just say, hey, Apple, you're abusing your position by basically targeting UTM parameters or third-party cookies or first-party cookies or headers, and just say, stop it. And then
Europe might. The
they'll be in
US
the courts for
probably
a long
never
time.
will, but Europe might.
Yeah, well, we're just about big enough to have an impact on the way these organizations work.
Good luck with that, Mike.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're just past the bottom of the hour, Jen. This has been fantastic to catch up with you, talk
Yeah,
about some of these topics.
definitely.
I was looking at my notes, and there's still probably another half a dozen I'd love to get in with you. So we're definitely going to want to have you come back at
I
some
would love
point,
that.
continue the discussion. For those that are listening and that want to get a hold of you or just see some of the work you're doing, where can people reach you online?
I am not hard to find. I'm on Twitter, just Jen Coons, Jen_Coons. I'm also on Measure Slack, which I really encourage anyone out there to be on. It's kind of the industry Slack channel. Anyone can join. Any questions that you have about Adobe Analytics or GTM or whatever it is, I spend altogether way too much time in there answering questions and asking questions. So, yeah, I'm always happy to help out, often too willingly distracted from my day job.
It's been fantastic to have you with us. And on behalf of Mike and myself, the OP community, appreciate it. And until next time, we will see you later.
Great. Thank you
Bye-bye.
guys very much. Have a good day.
Thanks a lot, Jen.